So for me, finding myself required as a necessity that I step out of the noise as a regular thing, building the muscle of what is the new normal, if I can use that phrase, of healthy. And learning to be okay with that level of quiet and stillness again, because it's being pushed out of us. And we're not going to be able to remember one day if we're not careful. Many people lose themselves this way. So rather than be a casualty of being unconscious, make it a point of stepping out of your busyness and distractions and going into a place of quiet. That was the key for me, finding me, the real me, the part of me that is that blissful state all the time, unchanging, unshakable inner peace. I can now access the real me when I need to. And it wasn't something that happened overnight, as I mentioned. It has been a journey of practice. Who are you when you are still? When you are not doing anything? When you are not thinking about anything? And when you are not identifying as anything? Who are you? This is one of the fundamental questions that many ask, to find the root of who they really are underneath all of the illusion. For me, this has been a journey, as it would be for most people, to find out and come to a solid understanding of the essence of who we are. For me, I went through a process of having to face death through the grieving process of losing my little brother to cancer, to melanoma cancer. Through that process, I learned that I wasn't afraid of death. I was afraid of the unknown. And I wasn't even afraid of the unknown. I was afraid of what I was projecting into the unknown, fear. And we all do that because of the way we've been brought up around this culture of not speaking about death, even though we spend more time dead than alive, I would imagine. So one of the first things I learned when I really wanted to embrace who I really am was that I had to face my fear of death, because I knew that deep down I was eternal. There's something in me that just knows that, a knowing, a spidey sense. And so I had to find a way to reconcile this conflict between this idea that I die off and I'm annihilated when I die, and this idea of death being part of my experience. Now, obviously, I can't tell you what death is like as the human that I am today, in the least. But I know that I have an intrinsic understanding, and that I have been through that many, 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 many times. And when we actually head on face what we're afraid of, it's never as scary as we think. And so this idea of facing this idea of annihilation was my biggest fear for a long time. I used to wake up in the dead of night and just be in a panic. I just didn't know who I was. But what I found is that I found myself, the true self, the I am, when I started to let go of the self-identity, the personality, and the programming. The first inkling that I wasn't my programming was in NLP class, Neuro Linguistic Programming. And when I asked my trainer, if we can be programmed, if our entire personality can be changed through mind control and programming, then who am I? Who am I? If everything else can be changed, who am I? And the answer, of course, was profound, and it was love. And I had to contemplate this idea that I was love for a very long time, because we're brought up with this very conditional sense of what love means. We're brought up with this idea that love is some sort of reward. Most of us are. Most of us have this idea that love is a reward, that we get it through doing, producing, and achieving, through proving our worth, through performing certain ways that are pleasing and approved by those that we want to be respected by. We do it to fit in society, to feel loved, to feel connected. But deep down, we all have this yearning. It's a natural yearning, because the truth is we are connected. And so love needs to change in this concept for us in order to be able to really perceive who we really are. Love needs to become something beyond this three-dimensional life. For me, love is the unchanging essence of awareness. I really feel limited by the human language to describe this. But for me, love is really who I am. And it's when I really am embracing and feeling it, who I am, I feel bliss. I feel immeasurable peace. I feel powerful and all-knowing and eternal. And it's funny because I grew up as a Christian, and that was some of the describers of who God was. But I've come to recognize that for me, God is not some separate, all-dominant, powerful, mighty Lord or over me. God is a word, a very limited word to describe love, or the pure awareness or consciousness that we are, the I am. I do feel very limited in being able to describe love and who I am here. I needed a direct experience to be able to really believe that I was love. I've always been a bit skeptical, as many of us are. We grow very skeptical when we've been hurt so many times and betrayed so many times. And so I needed to know firsthand what I was with a direct experience. How did I get there? I had to get to a point where I gave up, surrendered, the small me, the Melise, trying to find all the answers. And it wasn't until I went, I give up, I have no idea. And I spent a couple decades trying to find ideas. But that point where I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I admit it. I don't know. That point where I just gave up was where I really started to have direct experiences, because I was no longer trying to control the way I was understanding things. And I was no longer trying to dictate the narrative of how I would find the answers. And so, of course, when you stop resisting something, it doesn't persist anymore. So all these old narratives and stories and belief structures that are prolific in our experience just sort of became quiet. And it's like a level of discernment came in for me. Discernment meaning that I could begin to really, really attune to what was real and what was not real. And I found that what was not real was most of it. To a degree, most of the books I read, most of the religious structures, most of the modalities of approaching life, most of it had some degree of falseness to it because it was dictated by someone else separate. And so recognizing what was real really was quite simple. It didn't involve a whole lot of ritual or ceremony or initiation. What was real actually felt like putting on my own skin for the first time ever. What am I talking about? What was real is this idea of, I mean, we hear the word surrender all the time, but this idea that of completely giving up everything that I built up to feel safe in this world. So starting with my identity, starting with the way I would perceive myself, perception, the name, Melise, the skin color, the height, the interests, talents, gifts, knowledge, skills that I've collected, the family unit that I'd grown up with, the social systems that I'd accustomed myself to and felt comfortable with, the achievements, the ticks in the boxes that I'd done this and that and the other, the finances, the partner, the pets, the vehicle, the travel. You get the idea. So this is the self-identity, self-image that inevitably was created when I came here, based on programming mostly, three-dimensional programming, which is limiting, which makes us feel that we have a very limited destiny with limited possibilities. And when we label, we misconstrue the truth. We are very limited with language, as I've said from the beginning, trying to describe what we really are, love or awareness, consciousness. They're not the right words. We can only use words in our vernaculars that we actually understand. So if I said a word to you that you've never heard of, it means nothing. But if I said a word to you that you know, but I have a different understanding of what it means, we can't communicate. So this is the issue when we self-label and self-identify, is we limit ourselves because what we focus on grows. So we might think that we're limited by the way that we've perceived ourselves, and we are. So when I started to let go of some of these labels, I started to feel more me, the real me, pure awareness, having a human experience. And when I let go of some of the programming too, I recently did a video about slow living, bringing into conscious awareness this idea that we get stuck in busyness. We get stuck in busyness, the perfect distraction from becoming aware, the perfect distraction. And so we're being duped when we stay busy. All this multitasking, it's getting amped up. You know, you are not thinking sovereignly while you are caught up in distraction and busyness. You cannot possibly be, because you're being interfered with so many frequencies, so many, bombarded. And we've become very accustomed to that we normalize it. Recently, I went out, I do this pretty regularly on the weekends. I drove out to a beautiful hinterland area in a valley, and it's beautiful. And the moment I start to leave suburbia and the town and the people and move further away into this nature reserve with big trees and countryside, and I start to feel better. I start to feel more like myself, like I'm more comfortable in my own skin. I start to be able to breathe and become present. I feel heightened awareness. Awareness is the key word there. I feel more in control of my freedom, of my thoughts, of my emotions. I feel free. And the thing is, this is not something that should be a luxury. This is a healthy normal. And so it's easy for us to normalize all the noise and frequencies in our lives and busyness and distractions. And we're very adaptable as humans, very adaptable. We can normalize this to a point where we end up going, shit, excuse my French, where am I? I've lost myself. I've lost myself. I don't like it. I don't like who I am. And I feel stuck. So I would encourage you, while you can, while you've got a level of awareness and consciousness, to start making it absolutely important that you go back to periods in your life regularly, preferably daily, where you slow down and become conscious. You will find it is during these times that you receive inspiration, spirit. Because when you're busy and distracted in your everyday life, multitasking, rushing around, you will not be able to attune to spirit, to the still small voice that can be guiding you. And so for me, finding myself required as a necessity that I step out of the noise as a regular thing. Building the muscle of what is the new normal, if I can use that phrase, of healthy. And learning to be okay with that level of quiet and stillness again, because it's being pushed out of us, and we're not going to be able to remember one day if we're not careful. Many people lose themselves this way. So rather than be a casualty of being unconscious, make it a point of stepping out of your busyness and distractions and going into a place of quiet. That was the key for me, finding me, the real me, the part of me that is that blissful state all the time, unchanging, unshakable inner peace. I can now access the real me when I need to. And it wasn't something that happened overnight, as I mentioned. It has been a journey of practice. This means that I would spend intentional time each day coming back to me. So the key times for me, it started at meal times. So just before I would eat, remembering who I am, which for me was surrendering the built-up identity of the Melise personality completely. I give up. I give it all up. I give up my problems and challenges and concerns and issues that I perceive I have today. I let them go because they're not real. They are imagined, perceived, and I'm cut through the crap and I come back to base reality and remember who I am. Pure awareness. I am a human being, which is our natural healthy state, not a human doing. So when we come back into the room after a moment of surrender and remembering, we can feel more integrated as a human being, receiving our guidance directly from source, rather than trying to control everything. So if you're struggling with being lost in this world of illusion and finding yourself constantly stuck in a state of frustration or resentment or fear, then know that you are simply perceiving things through your small self, through the programming, through the image of you and not the real you. How do you let that go? You surrender. In your mind, you let go. And this whole process brings us closer to living in presence, living via the heart. If you find yourself stuck in these cycles, practice this technique. I would encourage you. It worked really well for me. I've got to a point where I can just switch on that surrender and be in that bliss. Step outside of the temporary illusion of Melise and go back to source. And then come back in, but in a surrendered state consistently. I'm not perfect, not at all, but it's much, much, much smoother now for me. And I believe that this is possible for all of us if we can just break out of that programming, if we can just awaken to the fact that we've been deceived and forget who we are. We've forgotten who we are. From the moment you were born, most of us forgot who we are. We were never taught by the culture or by our parents. We have to go through a journey. And if you're blessed, you will, if it's part of your destiny for this lifetime, you will find out who you are again, as I did. And you will remember and you will know, because in that moment that you surrender and you let go of everything and you feel that touch of love fall down into you and that channel from source, you will know, you will remember that this is who you are. You will know it feels right. It feels natural. It makes sense. It feels like home. And you'll want more because there's nothing like it. It's better than anything you can get from this external world that will keep you separate and afraid. So persevere. And if you're struggling with this, I would recommend that you start a journaling process. Journaling provides awareness, sheds light into the blind spots of your life, into the shadows. It'll allow you to bring stuff up that's been hidden, that's covertly operating. It'll allow you to release it. Journaling was a very big part of my experience of getting much more practice in surrender, because stuff would come up and I would be like, I don't know what to do with this. And I would let it go. And yes, that sounds simple, but it's a load off. If you can just bring it to your awareness, if you can just see it, which is half the battle, is we're running away from ourselves. You can just stop and see some of these shadows. They don't have the same power over you anymore. You have to see them first. If you're also struggling, I would recommend that you stop pushing yourself. Stop creating this agenda that you have to awaken, that you have to heal all your traumas and wounds, that you have to receive as much wisdom and intelligence and data from books as possible. This kind of thinking is control still. This is your small self still trying to create a control structure. Surrender is not about knowing the plan. And that sometimes is the scariest part of surrender. Surrender is surrender to everything. It's not even knowing what tomorrow will bring. This is good for you, even though it sounds really scary, because when we try and control things with our limited mind, we're only able to operate within the paradigms of what we've already understood, the input we've already received into the program, the stuff that's already programmed in. You can only operate within that paradigm. 95% of our thoughts are the same thoughts from the day before. So surrender is going, oh my God, I'm going to let go of all of my preconceived notions of how my life can be beautiful and in flow. I'm not going to try and understand this anymore. I'm going to let it go. I'll let go and let God, source, spirit, be the master. Surrender is recognizing that you are nothing more than the luminous power of source, and anything else is getting in the way. And so as a fully enlightened human, we would look at that person and we would see that they live through source code, source direction, source guidance. They are not operating at all with the small self, with the programming, with any kind of busyness, control, distraction, judgment, blocking, self-image, self-identity programming, wounds. The enlightened one, the one that has come to this place where they can be in bliss and be in the human body, is one who is operating with source as the master, not the brain, not the mind. So this gradual journey with surrender is to eventually get to this point where every waking moment is a surrender, not just when we remember. And so for me, that's still the journey. It's wonderful because there's always more opportunities to surrender. Like I remember recently I was at work and talking to my colleague and realizing when I got home that I felt exhausted and that I'd been kind of unconscious during conversations. And I'm like, how can I bring in surrender in the middle of conversations? And I was shown to just take more deep breaths between speaking. And remember in those moments of pause who you really are. And what amazed me as I started to practice that is the words that would come out of my mouth after these pauses were so beautiful. And this is actually how I approach my coaching and counseling with my clients, is I fully surrender before the client arrives so that the small self, Melise, gets out of the way and I can be a channel for source. I can be that benevolence, that love, that wisdom and guidance and intuition intelligence. It's not me, the small self, it's the I am, the we are. And language is limiting here. So I guess what I'm trying to say is surrender is a journey, and it gets better and better and better. And there's new opportunities in every moment to learn a new way of surrendering. So I hope that's helpful. I think that this is something we need to live as a direct experience. It's hard for me to speak this and share this to someone who's struggling still with surrender. Because I remember that. I remember that too. And I would encourage you to read a great book by Michael Singer, The Surrender Experiment. I read that this year after, well, coming quite into the surrender journey, but it was a beautiful way of explaining it. Surrender is not something you achieve. It's something that it's letting go of everything else, the illusion, to come back to base reality of who you really are. Because the surrendered state is the real you, pure awareness, loving awareness. There's nothing you need to do or achieve to get to that state. It's really about letting go of everything that's blocking your perception of knowing who you are. It's about letting go of the self-image and the programming and the belief systems and the striving to achieve and the fear. This is the big one. The wounding that you had, that you've grown up with, that's created a lot of repressed emotions. It's about letting go of all of that. That's why I find that for clients who struggle with surrender, sometimes we need to deal with a lot of those wounds first. We need to release a lot of these fears because they're blocking the ability to let go. So perhaps if you're really struggling with surrender, then journaling again to illuminate some of these programs, these wounds, these traumas, bring them up into the light so that you can let them go, so you can release them, so that they're not there holding your heart in a lock to feel safe. These programs exist because there was a reason at some point they kept you safe, that you don't need them anymore. So I would encourage you to journal, to find your programs, to find the traumas, to release them through shadow work, inner child work. There's plenty out there to help you with that. And then you might find it easier to let go. All right, well, I didn't plan this one today. I hope that this has been helpful. Yeah, I know that it's difficult sometimes to surrender, and the last video I did about slow living is very much part of the requirements almost of slow living is you have to let go of all of the illusions in the world that are distracting you from being present and mindful. Well, all the best. I hope you like this video. Please like, share, and subscribe if you resonated, and have a beautiful day.